Hello, welcome to What's Your Story? Every human beings have a story. Some could be happy, some sad, some thrilling. In this program, we are going to meet people from all walks of life. Not to hear or explore their life, but to hear their stories. It could be interesting, it could be inspiring, or it even could be revealing. Today my guest is a man who has traveled the world, not as a tourist, but as an ambassador. Welcome, Dato Ilango.
Thank you very much for having me.
Everyone pays to travel the world, but you get paid to travel the world. Looks like a dream job. So did you dream to become an ambassador, or was it your ambition?
Well, Ganesh, let me just tell you this. It was absolutely an accident, a fantastic accident in my case. Well, in 1984, when I graduated as a biochemist, jobs were hard to come by. So I decided to enroll in a master's program in UKM again. At that time, I thought, as a safety measure, I should also apply for a government job as well. And there was this application which was open at that time for the Perkhidmatan Tadbir dan Diplomatik, or simply known as PTD. And I applied for it in 1986 at the end of my master's studies. Well, a few months later, I was called for an exam. I must have passed the exam. They did not tell me because I was called for an interview. And after the interview, there was absolute silence. And one day at the end of the year in 1986, I received a very big envelope saying that I had been successful, and they asked me to turn up for 1-year training at Intan to become a Pegawai Tadbir dan Diplomatik. So that began the journey as in foreign service for me.
So that means your master's, did it help you or was it a waste?
Well, I would like to think it helped me because, although the basic requirement is a bachelor's degree with honors, but everyone has a bachelor's degree. So I suppose the master's degree put me on a stronger footing, and therefore it must have helped me, I think. But they did not honestly tell me whether it was due to my honors of my master's degree or not.
But it's good to have a master's degree,
I think
especially
so
when
too,
applying for PTD departments and all that.
I would agree, yeah. I mean, because the competition is stiff, so an additional qualification would not hurt, at least.
I assumed it was a long time ago, so now it should be PhD, I guess.
If you were to just go and look at the directory of the PTD officers in all the ministries, you'd be surprised to find that at least half of them are PhD holders.
Okay, now you have the job, okay, so you are now a diplomat, okay, so your first posting must have been very interesting, okay, so where was your first posting?
Well, my first posting was to Germany. At that time, there were still 2 Germanys. So the capital was Bonn. It wasn't Berlin as it is today. So I was in Bonn. My first posting in 1994 to 1997. It was a fantastic time of my life because as a junior diplomat, you had the least amount of work in an embassy, and I thought I had the most fun being in a country like Germany.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that was in West Germany.
In West Germany.
So what's the story there in Germany? What something experience you had which you never had in your life before?
Well, Germany was reuniting. I mean, the reunification of Germanies were taking place at that time. So therefore, the talk of the diplomatic corps was moving to Berlin, re-establishing diplomatic presence in Berlin. So it may sound rather, not very exciting for the ordinary layman, but can you imagine moving your entire diplomatic presence from Bonn to a new city called Berlin with all its historical implications? So that was exciting for me. I spent the last 2 years of my stay in Germany visiting every part of Berlin, East Berlin, West Berlin, looking for properties to be converted into our embassy.
So could you feel the Second World War in East Berlin?
Absolutely, Ganesh. I tell you, if you were to just cross Potsdam into East Germany those days, you find the buildings still had bullet holes in them. And the difference was absolutely stunning. West Germany was well developed, well paved. East Germany was still run down, roads had potholes, buildings with bullet marks, and all those kind of things. You could see World War was still there.
For you, it must be very interesting, the historic moment of East and West Berlin joining together, and you were there.
Absolutely.
That's great. So where was your next posting?
Well, I was asked to go to Conakry, Republic of Guinea, a small country in West Africa, to open a new embassy. You see, Dr. Mahathir had met with the president of Guinea a few months before that, and the Guinean president had expressed interest for Malaysia to have an embassy in his country. And Dr. Mahathir instructed Wisma Putra, which is the foreign ministry, to appoint suitable persons to go to Guinea to establish the embassy. And since I was French educated, I could read and write in French, and Guinea being a French colony, so they selected me. So I had to travel all the way from West Germany direct to Conakry, Guinea, to establish a new embassy. And that was a journey by itself, an adventure by itself, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's good. So, anything that really happened in Africa that you were part of the story?
1997 onwards, if you were to look in history, by the way, as an embassy in Conakry, we were also responsible, in diplomatic language it's called concurrent accreditation. I was responsible not only for Guinea, but also for Sierra Leone, also for Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, and Ivory Coast. And out of all these countries, there was civil war in every country. Liberia was at war, Sierra Leone there was a war, Guinea-Bissau there was war, and there was some kind of unrest in Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast as well. Now, in 1998, there was a civil war in Sierra Leone. The United Nations had a mission called UNAMSIL, UN Mission in Sierra Leone, established over there. And Malaysia sent a few peacekeepers to serve in that peacekeeping force called UNAMSIL. And lo and behold, I don't know whether it was lucky or not, some of our peacekeepers were kidnapped by the rebels, the Sierra Leone's rebels, and they were taken into the bushes and nothing was heard from them until I received instruction from Kuala Lumpur saying that the Chief of Armed Forces at the time mentioned that our peacekeepers, soldiers, had been abducted, and he wanted Wisma Putra to send someone to go negotiate their release. And I was there, having just established the embassy, and I was chargé d'affaires, and I was given the instruction to go and see what I could do to secure the release.
That must be very frightening. I mean, weren't you frightened that you might have been kidnapped or something like that?
Absolutely. Sierra Leone was under war at that time. There was no way you can travel to Sierra Leone. By the way, you can only travel by UN helicopters. And by the way, and even then, from my own contacts on the ground, I found that our peacekeepers were no longer in Sierra Leone. I heard that they had been taken into Liberia because the overall head of all the civil war there was the president of Liberia, Charles Taylor. So he was actually directing the civil war in Sierra Leone, and these people who had been kidnapped, peacekeepers, were apparently taken into Liberia. So I reported back to Wisma Putra that instead of negotiating with the rebels in Sierra Leone, we should negotiate directly with Charles Taylor in Liberia and see if we can secure his release. And for that purpose, I had asked Wisma Putra to get a letter from Dr. Mahathir, who was Prime Minister at that time, to explain, that our people have been kidnapped and to seek their good services, good officers to release them. So that started my negotiating journey with Liberia. With the letter that had come by fax the day before, I had to start the ball rolling by calling the president's office in Liberia. There was no way to travel, by the way, since there was a war. So I had the Liberian ambassador in Guinea. I invited him to come to my embassy, and we got the telephone number and everything, and we called up the presidential office in Monrovia.
Okay.
So we called, and the person picked up the phone was the vice president, Enoch Dogolia, And so I explained to him, sir, it appears that your people have abducted a few of our peacekeepers. And he said, Ambassador, I can assure you, we have not abducted any Malaysians. If there are any, they could be Indians. So I told him, sir, respectfully, it might not be very easy for you to distinguish an Indian from a Malaysian, because we also sometimes, some of us also look like Indians. And true enough, one of the peacekeepers was an Indian gentleman by the name of Ganesh himself. So I think they must have mistaken. They thought that they were all Indians, because the force commander of UNAMSIL was an Indian general. So they had assumed that all the soldiers must be Indians, not knowing that there were some Malaysians as well, who had been unfortunate enough to be kidnapped and brought to Liberia. So I explained to him, and I told him, look, I have a letter from my Prime Minister. Our two countries share a fantastic relationship. We would really seek your assistance to, assure that our people are safe and have them released. So he promised to get back to, I suppose the president or his authorities and come back to me. And when I called him back again, he said, well, all done, set, your people will be released in 5 days. So I reported back home, saying that, I was just informed by the Liberian Vice President that our people will be released in 5 days. I didn't know why 5 days, I did not ask, but later I found out that the abductees were in some part of Liberia, far away from the capital, and there was no telephone communication between the capital Monrovia and the rebels down in the south. So all communication had to be done manually. People had to run, go on foot, and pass the message.
It's like Olympic times.
Olympic those days.
Yes.
So I think the courier, the man courier, would have taken about 3 days to go and relay the message down south, and would have taken another 2 days for them to walk, march through the jungles and get into Guinea. So true enough, they kept their word. 5 days later, our soldiers were released.
Wow. The three must thank you for your negotiation skills to bring them to safety.
Absolutely. I wish I had met them. I could not meet them because they were down in the south and they were helped by the United Nations mission later on and brought back home. I had no time. I did not even have an opportunity to see them or talk to them at all. I would love to see them, if at all, If they're listening to this program, who knows?
Yes, that would be very interesting. Yes. And then you were in US too, right?
Yes. After Africa, I had to come back home, serve in the headquarters for a number of years. And then I was sent to Washington, D.C. in 2006.
But I was reading in papers, that time Malaysia didn't have an ambassador in US and you had to take charge or something like that?
Yes, most of my stay in Washington, D.C. was as a head of mission. Like you said, the ambassador had retired. For some reason, it was not easy for us to replace the ambassador in time. So I was head of mission for about a year and a half. And a lot of things happened at that time.
Okay.
George Bush was on his way out. George Bush the younger was on his way out. And a new president by the name of Barack Obama had been elected.
Wow.
It was a time of euphoria in the country.
You seems to be at the right place at the right time, historic things happening. And in Germany, when East and West getting together, you were there. The first black president in the world for US, you were there. Now, you tell me, how was the experience there?
Oh, the experience was, I really cannot describe it well enough. But, as I say, it was a euphoric moment, right? I mean, it was a time of change that was not possible. No Americans, nobody in the world believed it would ever be possible to have a black American as president. But I was also fortunate because I was head of mission. I was invited to the inauguration of the president, which was held on the 20th of January every year,
Wow.
So I was excited. And on the way to the Capitol, which is where the seat of the Senate and Congress is, I could see people were walking on the road, for miles and miles, trying to get to Washington, D.C. in time because the roads were blocked, traffic was cut off everywhere for security reasons. So lots of people had to walk from probably from midnight or very early in the morning hours, making their way to Washington, D.C.
This is January, so it must have been winter, right?
Ganesh, the 20th of January is probably the coldest day in the year. And because it was a presidential inauguration, even diplomats like us, we had to be there 3 hours in advance. And it's all done in the open air. I mean, you can see how the inaugurations are conducted. It's in the open air. And we were seated there 3 hours before the inauguration, before the president even arrives. It was a chilly day. I think it was about -4. I remember seeing the thermometer. It was drizzling on top of it, and there was a breeze. The things that you absolutely do not need on a day like that, We were cold. I was dressed to the nines. I had, layers and layers of clothes, some warmers, a big thick winter coat, hat and gloves and everything, and the ambassadors were all sitting next to each other. We were all huddling, you know, from the cold. But it was a sight, you know, because 3 hours later, Aretha Franklin comes out. She sings a fantastic song, and then comes out President Barack Obama, takes his oath. It was a sight to behold. I mean, we were seated not very far from him. I think it must have been about 30, 40 feet.
So did you get the opportunity to take a photograph with President Obama?
I got, because a week after that, Barack Obama invited all the heads of mission for dinner at the White House. And my wife and I had the opportunity to take a picture. We still have it in the office with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama.
Oh, that's great.
It was absolutely, I mean, I didn't realize how tall his wife was and how tall he was too.
Okay, in US, any incident that happened that, you know, caught your, where they needed you to handle the situation?
You know, Ganesh, you would have realized by now, you know, diplomacy deals with human issues. It's about human beings, about helping Malaysians all the time.
Yes.
You know? In Washington, D.C. was an absolutely a unique case. One day, a Chinese gentleman from Johor, frantically called up the embassy, and my consular officer took up the call. And the man informed him that his daughter had run away to America, and he believed that his daughter was going to meet another man who she had met on internet, and apparently he had promised to marry her and things of that sort. And the father was, did not know. So he called us, frantically asking for help. And by the time he called, the girl was already airborne. She was on her way to Washington, D.C.
What's the age of the girl?
The girl was 17 at that time, you know, so...
a schoolgirl?
A schoolgirl. She, you know, it was quite irregular, because the American embassy should not have issued her visa without having, a guardian's signature as well. Somehow, either they did not look at details carefully, or maybe the girl did not really fully disclose her age or something of that sort. But anyway, to cut it short, she got a visa, and she had met this guy on Facebook, and she had bought a ticket, and she was actually on air. And the flight was about another 4 or 5 hours more to arrive in Washington, D.C. So over there, I called up the Homeland Security Department and the FBI, and told them, look, we have a serious case here. It looks like a young girl, most likely is on her way to be abducted here. And if nothing is done, I fear that she could be sold into some kind of either human trafficking or prostitution ring or the sort, So the Americans were very helpful indeed, because this is the last thing they want to have. First of all, an underage girl who's got a visa from an American embassy in Singapore, flying here, and if she had been a victim of something, then I think it would have been a big story over there. So they all got into the action. We managed to get the air manifest, which is basically the list of passengers on the flight. Once we confirmed the girl was on the flight, we waited at the Washington, D.C. Dulles Airport. Girl arrived. My staff were there. We were hoping to talk to the girl and explain to her, etc. But the FBI and Homeland Security Department, they all cordoned off, pulled the girl one side, kept her in the waiting room in Washington, D.C. And in the interim, we were making plans, because the father was desperate to have the girl back. So we asked the father if we could buy a ticket back, because we couldn't, the Malaysian government could not pay for the ticket on his own. So the father was kind enough to give us his credit card. And just using his credit card, we bought a ticket and rerouted her from Washington, D.C. Instead of going to Boston, where the man was waiting for her, the abductor, we rerouted her flight from Washington to Narita and back to Malaysia. And the Homeland Security, the FBI, our embassy, we all worked hand in glove. The girl protested, of course. We put her back onto the flight, and I sent an instruction to our embassy in Tokyo to make sure that somebody waits in Narita to make sure the girl doesn't get out and walk out from the lounge, and to make sure that she continues to be put back onto the flight. So they all did their job, And the girl came back to Johor, and the father thanked us for getting his daughter back. But then here, for me, it was a heartwarming thing. Number one, I feel that we have saved father from having his daughter being sold into slavery somewhere. And I think we really saved a girl, I really feel she could have been in danger.
Did you all find out who the guy was?
Yes, we shared some of the details that the girl had from Facebook with the Homeland Security and FBI. And when they ran through the addresses that he had given, apparently all fake.
Oh.
And they did not tell me who he was, but I'm sure the American authorities must know who this particular individual was. I do not know what happened to him later on because he could have done something like this before,
Yes.
And I hope he was caught, but it was not for me to know. I was happy enough that I managed to at least help this father get his daughter back.
It's like in the movies,
Absolutely.
Like Bond movies, you guys waiting at the airport,
Yeah.
But it was a good thing, I mean, it actually the Malaysians should know we have embassies overseas, not just for the sake of having an embassy there. I mean, they will help if we really need help. This is a good example of that.
Correct. Yes. I mean, it's a good thing the father had, was quick on his feet. That he managed to call the embassy. Rather than trying to do something on his own and all sorts of things.
But but the thing is, it's not about them calling. It's normally these government servants, when they want to react to something, that time frame they take. Because of some whatever system they have inside. But in this case, lucky you acted fast. Before the plane we had about 4 hours, as you said. That was really good. I mean, Malaysians embassy's been doing very good then overseas.
Well, I think we have been quietly doing a great job, but it also depends. As a good diplomat on the ground, meaning to say when he's posted in a foreign country, he must have a lot of contacts everywhere. He must have telephone numbers handy. I mean, it would not have been possible for me if I did not know people in the Homeland Security, if I did not have people in FBI, if I did not know people in the State Department, for example, then I would have to go through the telephone directory, write letters and email and all these kind of things. By then it would have been far too late to save anyone. So a good diplomat should have done that, and I think and I feel I was a good diplomat.
The contacts are very critical.
Critical. I can just pick it up on my phone, speak to them.
Oh, that's very good. So after US, when I think you became an ambassador, the first time you became an ambassador was to which country is this?
I was sent as an ambassador to Lebanon and also High Commissioner to Cyprus at the same time. That was in 2010. So I was asked to relocate from Washington, D.C., which was a it's a fantastic place to be, by the way, to serve as a diplomat, and to be sent to Beirut. I was very, very apprehensive, I mean, Beirut, if you know your history,
it's a war town, right?
War city, yeah. There was a civil war for 25 years. And I was wondering what is going to be waiting for me. Would there be war? Who would there be, explosions and things like that? I was worried for my safety, but then, a diplomat has no choice, If he's instructed to go, he has got to go. But it was also a very rewarding experience, I tell you. Lebanon was also a very rewarding experience, a beautiful country, by the way. But it was exciting for many reasons, One, because we were very close to the Middle East. And soon after I had arrived, the Arab Spring broke out. And Syria was undergoing war, Egypt, there was turmoil, and many Malaysians were, stuck in between, and we had to evacuate. Many Malaysians from these countries, and I was also involved in evacuating some from Syria, back to Malaysia, Malaysian students and citizens.
So everywhere you go seems to be happening.
Yeah. I think we had one thing or the other, a bit too much of excitement. But Lebanon was also interesting because towards the end of my stay, the spillover effect had already started to come into the country. So there was a series of car bombs and those sort of things all over Beirut. But thank God we were lucky, I'm safe. Again, it also depends on the kind of contacts you have. You need to know.
So you need to know the good context and the bad context too.
And you got to know the intelligence people there on the ground, because they are the ones who will be first to alert you. Hey, look, maybe tomorrow you should not go to that part of the town. We don't know, something is going on. They won't tell this publicly.
I see.
But if you are, if you're have close contacts with the intelligence and all that, sometimes they might tell you that.
I see.
You know,
So your last posting was as a High Commissioner to
Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah. Before, I mean, after Lebanon, I came back, of course. That period was also very interesting. You know, if you recall, we had an incident called MH17. Our aircraft was shot over Ukraine. Right? So when I came back after Lebanon, back to Kuala Lumpur headquarters, I was the Undersecretary for European Affairs. So I was in charge of the European desk, meaning to say that all our embassies in all of Europe report to me.
Okay.
And all the foreign embassies, European embassies in Kuala Lumpur, also use me as their first point of contact. I'm their boss, so to say. You know.
Okay.
So the incident took place in Ukraine, and of course, you know, it's right in my own area. I have to start, you know, the investigation. I was not part of the investigation, but the entire affair was the European, you know, kind of affair. The desk was very busy, and a few months down the road, Australia, Netherlands, Malaysia, Belgium, we established what is known as the Joint Investigation Team. To try and you know, to find out who actually were the culprits who shot this plane down. And I was the first lead negotiator for Malaysia in that team. So it was very interesting because we regularly met all over the world, you know, working with the UN, trying to get information about how and why this happened. There were theories, of course. We were trying to create an international tribunal to try, you know, the perpetrators of the crime. But you know, all went to the UN Security Council. But that resolution did not pass eventually because it was vetoed by Russia.
Russia.
Yeah,
Okay.
So that was one of the interesting experiences, acting as the lead negotiator for the JIT. There was another one that I'm particularly proud of. I was also Malaysia's lead negotiator for an agreement that we signed with the European Union. It is known as the EU-Malaysia Partnership and Cooperation Agreement. A very long-standing agreement. It's a massive agreement of a few thousand pages. So I was a negotiator. I was lead negotiator for Malaysia, meaning to say that all the Malaysian the ministries, we have 24 ministries, they were all under me. So I was the leader of the negotiations, and during my time we managed to wrap it up. So it was a feather in my cap as well. I think it was a very difficult agreement, negotiation. Finally, we nailed it down.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah. So that soon after that, they sent me off as High Commissioner to Singapore.
Okay. Any stories in Singapore?
You know, as I said earlier on, it's all about human beings, right? Helping the Malaysians overseas. And Singapore is one of our closest neighbors. We have, at that time, I recall we have about 250,000 Malaysians crossing every day from Johor to Singapore and vice versa, you know, for work. In fact, the causeway, the Singapore-Malaysia crossing, is the third largest land crossing in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The first is between Mexico and US. So that's, I think, takes a few million people a day. The second one is between Hong Kong and China, which is actually within a country, but it's also considered as an international crossing. Third largest is Singapore and Malaysia.
Oh, 250,000 people travel each day to go and work in Singapore.
Singapore, you know, and that is actually on the lower side, because now I saw in the paper somebody mentioned it's about 300,000. One doesn't really know the full numbers, but I suppose it ranges between 200 to 300,000 or 250 to 300,000.
Oh, that's a big
but it's still very large.
Yes, yes.
And can you imagine when 250,000 people go up and down, you're bound to have all sorts of issues.
True.
You know, people losing either passports or, you know, licenses, or dying in Singapore, or just losing their way, you know, Alzheimer's patients going lost, drug trafficking cases, all types of things.
Yeah, Lord. In fact, Singapore hangs people for drug trafficking, and most of the Malaysians got caught there, something like that.
Yes, right? Unfortunately, I mean, Singapore and Malaysia, you know, we share same type of law, you know, mandatory death sentence for drug trafficking, and Singapore is very strict about it. Unfortunately, a number of Malaysians were in the death row in Singapore, and when I was there was, you know, a Malaysian who had exhausted all appeals and everything, and finally was going to face the gallows. And of course, the family was distraught. They had, wanted the High Commission to come and help and everything. We tried, of course, we tried to talk to the Singapore authorities, etc. They were sympathetic, they said, he has full recourse to law, and he has exhausted every possible avenue. The only last avenue would have been pardoned by the president, but it did not happen. So unfortunately, I was sad to see that some Malaysians had to go to the gallows.
But so many Malaysians in Singapore, what if they get sick and they die in the hospital or something like that? How does you all handle this kind of matters?
Yeah, this is also a very serious problem. I mean, often what we try to do is that if there are families, it's fine. You can call the families and the families will come and take care of it. But there are also cases where either they've been abandoned by families, or the person is in a coma, for example, and is not able to respond, or they are not able to tell. So in cases like this, Singapore would communicate with the High Commission and encourage us, or in fact get us to try and get the family so that they can take the Malaysian patient.
Any difficult case you faced?
Yes, there was one individual, a very elderly man. I think he was very sickly too. He couldn't be moved. He was in a hospital, and the bill had come up to several thousands. Family was not willing to pay because they could not, I think, afford to pay. And Singapore, of course, did not want to continue to incur, that bill. So they wanted the High Commission to take over, but I had to be firm and told them, look, if you want to move them, we can make arrangements with our hospitals in Johor, but the Singapore authorities will have to be fully responsible for transporting this sick man from Singapore to Johor, which means to say they need to have the full works, ambulance with all doctors and all the machines and everything, so that nothing happens in between.
This patient is in coma?
He wasn't in coma. This particular individual wasn't in coma. I think he was very sick.
Oh, okay. ICU patient?
ICU patient, and I think it was very expensive kind of treatment that were given to him. It was far cheaper in Johor, but and the Malaysian government is, and I tell you one thing for sure I've learned about one thing is certain I can say, our health facilities given by the Malaysian government has to be the top, if not one of the top in the world. The government dishes out very high quality healthcare at absolutely low cost. And this man, can you imagine Johor? I think it was Tunku Ampuan Putri Hospital. No questions were asked. They took him in, and I think, of course, government is going to incur the bills.
Yes, true.
And they continued because it is a job of the government to look after citizens in any case. It was sad for me in one sense because, the family was not, we were not able to get in touch with the family at that time. But I was also happy that, we were able to at least assist the man being transported back to his home country, at least in Johor.
So finally you got the Singapore government to take care of that part of it?
That part, they did that, they were careful about it too. So they managed to transport the man across, and that's it.
So now you have retired from this foreign ministry. So what is your feeling like? Do you miss it?
Well, I retired on 14th of September last year. Yes, I must say I miss it. There are some things which I miss. The things that I miss are, the diplomatic receptions, meeting other diplomats, exchanging news, and all this kind of stuff. Of course, we all felt we were very important, doing a lot of important things. But I also do not miss the kind of high pressure, this work entails.
Yes.
In Washington DC, for example, let me tell you, there's a 12-hour difference. So when we go to sleep, that's when Kuala Lumpur wakes up. So all the instructions will be coming to me at midnight. When we're about to sleep, that's when all the high-powered cables, urgent cables will be coming. Hey, look, this is happening. We need you to do this and then, and so on and so forth. So it's very difficult because you're sitting on a different time frame, and your bosses at home, they don't really care, if they have, because they have a job to do too.
Yes.
If they have to reach out to you to give you some instructions, well, 3 o'clock in the morning is as good as 3 o'clock in the afternoon for them. They'll just pick up the phone and give you the instruction. So it's very high pressure too. And when I became ambassador, even more high pressure because the entire weight of running the mission is upon you. There's no one else that you can actually, hide under or hide behind, So I don't miss that pressure.
Okay, Dato. Thank you very much for your time. It was very interesting, to know the stories. Every time, we thought that, being an ambassador is just they're going in the other side of the country. When you want to travel, you just approve some visas, and that kind of things. But, you had a bond life, you were part of history. It's very great to have you here. And I would love to have you here another time to hear more stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you. I thank Vanakkam TV as well for this opportunity given to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all, folks. Okay, next time we are going to meet another person with a different story. Bye.